Hello, my name is Eric Ford. I'd like to talk to you today about strategic leadership, creating a learning organization, and an ethical organization. Parts 1 and 2 of this series were comprised of my interview with Tony Ray, America's Cup sailor, and general bon vivant, if you will, globe-trotting around the world. I'd like to thank Tony for his help with this project, and I hope you found it interesting. Parts 3 through 6 will deal with the material covered in the book today, and the first part is Elements of Leadership. The learning objectives for this module include, you'll understand the 3 key interdependent activities which successful leaders must engage in. In other words, you have to do all 3 of these things in order to succeed. We'll also talk about the 3 elements of effective leadership in terms of integrative thinking, overcoming barrier or facilitating change, as we might want to say, and the effective use of power. We'll cover something called emotional intelligence, and I'll share with you some of my personal views about how that's taken form. All right, let's get to it. There's probably been more ink spilled about the topic of leadership and management than all other topics, and if you told me put together, I wouldn't doubt it. There's several problems with leadership in the way it's thought of, in my opinion, and I may have mentioned some of these in my overview of what strategy is. We tend to think of leaders as having been born. There's an expression, born to the purple, which is the reference to the fact that only the royals were allowed to wear purple in many of the European courts for many years. Hence, born to the purple. So you were born to it. Or people arise to the moment, this sort of heroic form of leadership. And these are still pervasive, by the way, in much of the management literature, and really the way leaders see themselves. It's not unusual for competent managers who do a very good job of managing the day-to-day activities of a firm to become the leader and then start to ascribe to themselves some sort of supernatural or above the norm aspect of leadership, thinking that that's what got them there, whereas it's really as much chance and just constant good management that got them there. At any rate, what are the 3 interdependent activities of leadership? Well, they all aim at one goal, and that's the process of transforming organizations from what they are to what they want to be. And it's not just what the leader wants them to be. I would tell you good leadership takes into account what the employees want the firm to be. So what are the 3 interdependent activities? Well, first is setting direction. I'm often referred to this as the compass. In other words, what is your true north? What is it you want to drive on? The second part is designing the organization. This is the map. This is how you traverse where you are to where you want to be through the direction. Not every leadership activity is a direct route to what you want to do. Good leaders go after things as if they were, but it's not always direct. And lastly, nurturing a culture of dedicated excellence and ethical behavior. This is far easier said than done, and I would tell you this is the part that may be the most difficult to achieve. So let's go over them one by one. Setting direction. What do we do? Well, as a leader, you need to scan the environment. It's often said that people have a sixth sense about what the market wants. And you see this when people develop products that you and I might not have thought had any place in the market, yet take off in popularity anyway. A good example of that is Twitter. When I first saw Twitter, 140 characters sort of blasted out into space with no real governing principle that I can see other than keep it short. How would that product have possibly made it in the market? But people found many very powerful uses for it, and it's a remarkable product. I myself use it on occasion. And what do you need? You need a knowledge of your stakeholders. What is it about these things that people will value? If you've ever read a book called The Tipping Point by Malcolm McDowell, not Malcolm McDowell. McDowell, I think, is the man's last name. No, Malcolm Gladwell, excuse me. Malcolm Gladwell. He talks about identifying stakeholders that are thought leaders and having them help set the direction. So that's the key people in the market that he reaches out to understand. and also to get these salient environmental trends. And integrate that knowledge into a vision of what the organization could or can become. So what are some of the required capabilities for setting direction? Well, you need to have the ability to solve increasingly complex problems. Now, part of solving increasingly complex problems can be to simplify. In other words, to strip away. One of the common features of organizations over time is they build systems and processes over processes, and it eventually becomes necessary to strip some of that out. So when you take over as a new leader, oftentimes one of the first activities is sweeping away the old. The second part is be proactive in approach. And I would say not just proactive, I would say be positive. That where we're going is a place we want to be. If you look at the names of cities throughout the Midwest and the Far West, where many people may have grown up who are watching this, you'll see the names of towns that make them attractive. I used to live near a place called Happy, Texas. It was called Tulia, where I'm from, and it was between Happy and Sweetwater. And you can imagine how those names were designed to draw people to them. Okay. The other part is to develop viable strategic approaches. In other words, are we sure we can actually get to that place we want to be with what we have available? And how do you do that? Well, as I said, if you view it as a trip, you have to design the organization or the vehicle that's going to get there, putting in structures, teams, systems, and processes, and I would also say incentives, meaning negative features that penalize people, and rewards, positive features that reward people for doing what you want. One simple way to be a good leader is to simply remove the barriers to the desired outcomes and put up barriers to negative ones. Difficulties in implementing the leader's vision and strategy often revolve around designing the organization. Many of the design features in organizations are very, very rigid for a valuable reason. They were supposed to be rigid. They were the scaffolding upon which the organization was built. But people in the modern company don't understand the responsibilities and accountabilities around those structures that were originally put in, or they may no longer serve us well. So it's very difficult to redesign the organization, the work processes, etc. Reward systems no longer motivate individuals and groups toward desired actions or goals. I can talk about in our own life here at the university. We have a reward system that frankly doesn't pay anymore for doing service activities or even being a good teacher. The thing that it typically rewards is publishing peer-reviewed papers, although our system actually does reward teaching somewhat. With that said, is that what we really need? The other thing is many of you taking this class may know that getting into this class, we've artificially capped its number. Well, that's a bad system. We should have been able to take as many people as we could subscribe as long as we were making money. So essentially we were turning away money at the beginning of this course, if you can believe that. And somehow we're in a budget cutting period, so it doesn't really make much sense. The reward system is not well designed. And that's actually an example of the third bullet here, the inadequate or inappropriate budgeting and control system. Insufficient mechanisms to coordinate and integrate activities across the organization. You see the way this course is put together, where I'm using YouTube, a blogging piece of software for posting the videos, as well as Blackboard. That's really not a great set of mechanisms, and it forces me into many activities that I could avoid. So question, XYZ's CEO scrapped the company's commission-based reward system because it was rewarding employees for inappropriate behavior. This is an example of, and I'll give you a few minutes to think about it. Commission-based rewards are like realtors get. When they sell a house, typically the realty company gets 6%. If there's a buyer's realtor and a seller's realtor, that is divided, and it's not just 3%, 3%. Usually the seller's realtor gets slightly more. It depends on how it's set up in every market. And then the realtor themselves may only get a very small fraction of that. But those are commission-based reward systems. And you can imagine if your agent is a realtor and they get paid as a percent of how much the house cost, are they going to try and find you a house and negotiate down the price? Think about it. So nurturing an excellent and ethical culture, and we're going to come back to ethics at the end of this lecture, but having a good ethical company is not just an option anymore. You often hear Milton Friedman quoted when you hear him say, the only function of a company is to the shareholders. In other words, to increase the wealth of shareholders. That no longer flies. We have to be ethical as well. Look at BP. Integrative thinking. This is the process by which people reconcile opposing thoughts to identify creative solutions that provide them with more options and alternatives. This is also a form of creative thinking, if you think about creative thinking writ large. How does integrative thinking work? Well, this is really, and you can start anywhere in this diagram and move up and down it. And what it does is it gets us from our conventional thinking, inside the box, to our integrative thinking, or outside the box sort of approaches. I like to start with salience. What are the features of the problem? A well-defined problem lends itself to effective answers. Causality. We often ascribe causality to actions in a bad way. In other words, we say this caused that, and that may or may not be true. Particularly in English, the way our language is structured, we often assign causality to people. Whereas, so what are we doing? We're assigning blame. And that actually causes problems. So you need to be very careful about causality and actually get to the real causes. Then you have to think about architecture. The people who are often best at this will be the ones who insist on going up to the whiteboard and to start drawing pictures. These are valuable people to identify, because one thing good leaders do is identify people's skills. So these are the people who work in visual terms. Lastly, it's reaching a resolution and building consensus about what are the things we want to do and what are the trade-offs we're willing to make. Okay. Barriers to change. Nobody likes change. I don't know why. It's just the way it is. This is the reason organizations are slow. One of my colleagues routinely shows me a book with a picture of a battleship on the cover and says it takes 2 years to change anything in the university. And when you say that at the outset, guess what? Everything does take 2 years to change at the university. And that's a sad state of affairs, and it need not be. I've actually stolen that book and thrown it away. So don't buy the book with the battleship on the cover. Why are they slow? People have vested interest. Every system is designed to get the results it's currently getting. As a matter of fact, it's perfectly designed to get the results it's getting. So if you look at the people who benefit from the current system, they're the people who don't want change. And they create new barriers. They engage in behaviors that are negative, and they create politics around issues that you don't want. And the other thing is they'll put in time constraints. They will volunteer to take charge of committees and slow down processes. The effective use of power. So this is what you have to employ as a leader to get over these barriers. And there's two kinds. Power in general is the leader's ability to get things done. They have formal power, which is what they derive from their position. And they also have personal power. And this is referent or expert power. In academia, we typically hire PhDs to run the university, although I see no reason to believe that a PhD is necessarily the best person to run our business. That's just me. That is obviously not the common wisdom, so think about it. Referent power is based on their experience and their interpersonal relationships, etc. So that's the personal side. Organizational, legitimate power. They're given the authority to do what they want done. Reward power. They hold the purse strings. They can move people up and down. Coercive. They can move people down and cut their pay. And information. And this is one of the ones I want to say you need to be most careful about. People use and control information to negative ends often. And information is a form of power, and I'm sure you've seen it.